Hi everyone, and welcome to Exploring the Build. If you've just found this place, then welcome, and if you're returning, I'm glad to have you back. I'm Alex, and this is my channel where we explore and theorycraft different character builds for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Today, we are continuing with one of our quick builds, where we'll be exploring a briefly summarized character build for D&D 5e. As always with our quick builds, if there's ever a build you'd like to see me explore in the future, be sure to let me know in the comments below. The concept of our video today comes from Trampled by Yellow, who asked to see a character concept built that they were thinking of playing for their next game. They were hoping for a Nightcrawler-esque half-elf, someone who's able to be one with the shadows, jump around in the dark, but also in the light, creating advantage as often as possible, and using elven accuracy. That was another must-have to have on the character. But the main concepts are being able to be invisible in darkness and having the ability to teleport around. This is definitely going to be an interesting character build, as not only is it going to be a character that we're wanting to build for elven accuracy and that super advantage that elven accuracy provides, or even someone who's going to be teleporting, jumping around, but we're really going to be getting a Master of Darkness character as sort of an answer to our Champion of Light that we did a few weeks back. By the end of the build, we'll have a character with a lot of mobility, certainly, but also a fair number of ways to get that on-demand advantage and have super advantage from elven accuracy. Without any other further ado, let's just jump right into the build. Starting off with our lineage and character creation, we're going to want to be a half-elf. We're not going to use the typical half-elf stat line, and instead we're going to want to use the optional rules from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything in order to redistribute our ability scores as we see fit. That means we're going to get a +1 to one ability score, a +1 to another ability score, and a whopping +2 to a third ability score. But more than that, we're going to want to be a specific lineage of half-elf. See, in the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, which is a very old book and doesn't necessarily have the best features available, it does have the option to not just flavor, but mechanically change your half-elf. We're going to be a half-drow specifically. Half-drow means that we have access to some innate spellcasting at the cost of our skill versatility. This is definitely going to be the prime lineage for us because we'll still get access to elven accuracy. We could be a full drow, but we don't necessarily have to, so we have some extra stats to distribute as well. And honestly, while it is a pretty nice choice, another backup choice, if you're able to, would be to take Shadarkai. Shadarkai, like Eladrin, are technically not elves specifically. They're related, but they aren't an elf subrace, so that means that they don't get access to elven accuracy. If your GM's nice and they allow you to get elven accuracy as a Shadarkai, that's also another really good option because Shadarkai have an innate bonus action to just teleport, and that's perfect for Nightcrawler as well. For us though, we're going to be a half-elf drow, and we're going to get the following stats after character creation. We're going to want to put a +1 into wisdom, a +1 into constitution, and a +2 into dexterity, and come up with the following array of ability scores. We're going to want 8 strength, putting no points into it. We're going to want dexterity of 17, putting 9 points into that, and then our +2. We're going to put 7 points into constitution to get 15 total, after also adding in our +1. We're going to want wisdom 15 as well, after doing the same thing, putting 7 points into it and adding our +1 there. And then we're going to want a charisma of 12, putting our last 4 points into that. Admittedly, you can definitely change around how these stats work if you really want to. We actually probably have enough points that instead of specializing as much as we did into dexterity, constitution, and wisdom, we could have relatively good charisma and strength. For our background, any background kind of works, but if we're going for Nightcrawler specifically, I think folk hero actually is probably the best one for us. We could literally be a pseudo superhero type character that already exists in the world, and we're just trying to eventually get better as a superhero as we level up. Jumping into the build now, we're going to look at 5 level increments and just sort of summarize what we get at those 5 levels. So our first 5 levels are going to be into monk. We want to be a monk because at level 3, we want to be a shadow monk. Shadow Monk is great at interacting with darkness and shadows, and eventually has the ability to teleport very effectively. The Shadow Arts ability we get right away is also going to be very important to us for getting on-demand advantage. At level 4, our first feat is going to be dedicated to Elven Accuracy, allowing us to round off our Dexterity at 18, since it is a half feat, and it gives us super advantage whenever we attack with Dexterity, which all of our unarmed strikes are Dexterity based, so That's pretty much every attack that we make will have super advantage when it has advantage. The thing is, we don't really have a way to get advantage on demand just yet. And really, it doesn't really matter how you spin it for this character. If we had tried to get on-demand advantage first, well, we wouldn't have super advantage because we wouldn't have picked up Elven Accuracy as quickly. So it doesn't really matter which option you try to go through first. We go up and get Elven Accuracy because right after Elven Accuracy, we get extra attack at level 5, as well as Stunning Strike because monks just get Stunning Strike, and that's also pretty nice. Our next set of levels is actually going to be only 6 to 7. I sort of lied when I said we were doing 5 level increments, but at levels 6 to 7, we're going to jump out of Monk after picking up extra attack and Elven Accuracy to jump over to Fighter. As a fighter, our fighting style that we're going to want to get right away is Blind Fighting. Blind Fighting will give us super advantage when we are in darkness. Essentially what we're setting up to do is the same sort of thing as the Warlock Devil Sight plus Darkness combo, where we're going to cast darkness on either an enemy or ourselves, and then we're going to try and get next to that enemy. Since we have Blind Fighting, as long as we're within 10 feet of an enemy, it doesn't matter if we can see them or not, we know they're there. And because they will hopefully not be able to see us, and we will effectively be able to see them, we're going to gain advantage on our attacks against them because of how that condition works. That means that right away at level 6, we now have 2 attacks from our attack action, we have a bonus action unarmed strike we can do, or we can use a key point to do flurry of blows in order to have 2 extra attacks. That's potentially 4 attacks with advantage, which can be a lot of burst damage all in one turn. It just takes a little bit of setup because we do have to spend 2 key points to cast Darkness through our Shadow Arts ability, or we can cast it through our lineage from being a Drow half-elf. We get the Darkness spell innately, meaning we actually don't need to spend the key points if we don't want to. Immediately after that, at level 7, we can pick up Action Surge from being a Fighter 2, and that will just double the amount of attacks that we get on our big burst round for a lot of extra output of damage and a lot of extra output of super advantage. At levels 8 to 10, now that we have set up our super advantage combo and can dish out a whole bunch of attacks and actually trigger Elven Accuracy, we're now going to jump back to Monk because it's time to pick up some actual teleport abilities. Right away at level 8, aka level 6 Monk, we gain Shadow Step. Shadow Step allows us to use a bonus action to teleport from one area of dim light or darkness to another within 60 feet of us. After we teleport, we then gain advantage on the first attack we make against an unsuspecting enemy. This isn't going to be the most ideal option for getting off our big burst damage combo in one round, but it is good for setup. We could cast Darkness on ourselves or on an enemy, and then try to bonus action teleport to them if we think we can't just make it to that enemy in one movement. Out of combat though, this is a great option for mobility that can really make us feel like Nightcrawler. If you're running around at night or somewhere like the Underdark, then you get a lot of movement with this effect because there's just so much dim light and darkness to go around. At level 9, we are a Monk 7, which gives us Evasion and Still Mind. These are just nice abilities for our defenses. And then at level 10, we get another fighting style from Monk 8. I would recommend picking Fighting Initiate here to pick up Unarmed Fighting to just boost all of our unarmed strikes to be a D8. We already made them magical a little bit back at level 6. It's nice to have a boost to our damage die size without having to continue up into Monk, though you could continue up into Monk if you wanted to. Finally, it's time for levels 11 plus. Here, I would personally recommend just going back to Fighter and going up that way, but you could realistically pick anything that you wanted to. Going Fighter, though, will get us a lot more ability score improvements / feats, so we can round off our other stats like Wisdom and Constitution, or we can pick up other feats that would synergize really well for us. I think Shadow Touch would be a really nice feat to pick up thematically, even though it doesn't offer us too much. Just the ability to go invisible once per day for free, as well as a Necromancy or Illusion spell to cast once per day for free, and that could be pretty nice. Going up further into Monk as well does get us more Shadow Monk abilities, which might be exactly what you want, since there are some kind of interesting ones in there. Though really, I think Shadow Step is probably the premier darkness ability for us, since it gives us so much potential mobility outside of combat. With Fighter, though, the important thing is going to be our subclass choice, and there's a few good options. The one I would really advocate for is Champion, of all things. Champion gives us increased crit range, and when we're attacking with potentially 6 attacks in a burst damage round, 2 from our attack action, 2 from flurry of blows, 2 from an action surge in our attack action, that's a lot of rolls with super advantage, hopefully, assuming we're in darkness, we can see an enemy thanks to blind fighting, and then we have elven accuracy, allowing us to crit on 19 or 20 instead of just 20 for that burst round, would hopefully dish out a lot of extra critical hits. Another option could be Eldritch Knight if you wanted to play into some spellcasting features. If you did pick Eldritch Knight to get some cantrips and some spellcasting, I definitely recommend Shadow Touched, because then we can use our Shadow Touch spells with the spell slots we get from Eldritch Knight, and that's a pretty interesting choice. And the last choice I should mention is also Echo Knight. Echo Knight thematically works really well because we could theme our Echo to be a shadow doppelganger of ourself. I plan on going more in depth into a future build between Monk and Echo Knight, but just know that it's a really good option both thematically and mechanically as well, thanks to Unleashed Incarnation. We have such a high constitution that we can use Unleashed Incarnation to get even more attacks off during our burst round. Every time we take extra attack, we could use a use of Unleashed Incarnation, getting 3 attacks from our attack action, 3 attacks from our action surge, and then 2 extra attacks from our flurry of blows for a total of 8, all with super advantage. We'd be trading crit range, but depending on how much you value crit range compared to just extra attacks, it might not be too important. The one thing I would warn about with Echo Knight is the fact that we would become very bonus action heavy depending on how often we're having to re-summon our Echo. It would also require some extra setup, given that not only do we now have to cast Darkness, we have to get our Echo into the field, then we have to get next to an enemy in order to actually go through and do that full burst damage round. Beyond that, that is pretty much the build. Overall, we certainly feel like a Master of Darkness since we want to use Darkness as much as possible to make the most out of our character mechanically. Whether or not we feel like Nightcrawler is probably based on how well you theme the character, and admittedly we might not have as much teleport ability as we would like to have, but the teleport ability that we do have is completely free and on demand. Shadow Step is really, really good. It doesn't use a resource like Misty Step would, and it has a really decent range as well. I think one thing that would be really cool is the fact that we could, at night, traverse a full ocean. This is something that Nightcrawler actually did. I remember seeing an episode of one of the various X-Men TV shows where Nightcrawler was either jumping out of a plane or something where he was over the ocean, and he just used his power to get back to land. He just would teleport into the air, fall, but before he actually fell and hit the water, would teleport back up into the air. We can technically do that, assuming it's pitch black out over the ocean at night at some point in time. That's an area of dim light or darkness, and if your DM says otherwise, I would say they're definitely wrong. And then we could just use our 60 feet teleport to teleport an angle, so that way anytime we would fall, we just go back up. Fall rules might sort of prevent us from doing this as nicely as we want to, but as a monk we have slow fall, so we can kind of counteract that as well. Admittedly, I didn't perfectly math it out, but it feels like something that we definitely could do. If you did want more ability to teleport, as well as go invisible, like I said, Eldritch Knight is great because it gives us spell casting, and we have so many feats that we could pick up not only Shadow Touched, but also Fey Touched to give us a free casting of Misty Step and be able to cast Misty Step with our spell slots that we have. I do think the last thing to mention is the fact that we use unarmed strikes. Nightcrawler could use weapons for sure, and I'm sure he probably did in some shows or comics that I just haven't actually seen. But as a superhero, generally, he's going to be punching people and using unarmed strikes to try and knock them out, as opposed to just outright kill them. And I think that's very thematic for us to be able to have that same ability. Monks are really good at feeling like vigilante or superhero type characters. Thank you so much for coming on the journey with me, and I hope to see you in the next one.